TrueFire Live. We are really excited today. We've been looking forward to this session for a long time. We've got Jim Oblon in the house. I would hope that most of you have heard or know of Jim. And for those of you who are meeting him for the first time, I promise you, man, you're in for a really pleasant surprise. So let me tell you a little bit about Jim. He hails out of Nashville. He's headed to LA. We'll talk about that in a little while. He is one of the industry's go-to session players. He's worked with Phil Ramone as a studio musician. He's played guitar, bass, and drums on Paul Simon's So Beautiful or So What. Toured extensively with Paul Simon. I think pretty recently worked with him and recorded with him in the Blue Light. Has an awesome solo recording out, guitar record with Jim Keltner on drums, Larry Goldings on organ. He's played electric and acoustic guitars on Rodney Crowell's Close Ties. For such a young cat, he's got a pedigree a mile long. We've just spent 2 days in the studio with him filming his first TrueFire course, RetroACTIVE electric guitar. And I think you're going to really dig what he's got to say, and I hope you're digging, what he's playing right now. So without further ado, Jim, say hey to everyone. Say hello.
Hello, everyone.
Let's start off by describing what you mean by retroactive electric blues. What is that all about?
Well, I think retro, usually, it's about the past, something that happened before, going back. But this is not simply a recreation of something that already happened. It's sort of taking elements from the past and making it active, making it alive in today. Not breathing new life into it, but maybe it's a little bit of shot of B12 or grass, grass shot,
Yeah, exactly.
Or, I don't know,
I'd say it's very active, no doubt about that.
Yeah.
I know this. There's, we have a pretty large library here. We have nothing in the library quite like this. I think it's going to be a real treat. It was a blast for us filming this with you.
Yeah, great.
And, I love your kind of approach to, taking something old, vintage or retro in a way, but breathing new life into it. That's the active part.
Sure.
And, I think folks are going to really digging into this course.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm sure usually we wait for the end of the broadcast to talk about equipment, but I think we should do that right off the bat.
Why not?
Because that'll,
jump right in.
explain this awesome sound we've been hearing for a couple of days.
Sure.
Step us through. Start with the guitar. What are you playing?
Okay, the guitar is just a parts guitar, but what's interesting about it is that it's a Gibson scale.
Yeah.
So it's a Gibson scale neck, really on a Telecaster body or Esquire body because it's got one pickup. So basically, it's about 3/4 of an inch shorter than a regular Fender. That I sort of like playing on Epiphones and Gibsons better than a Fender, so it just gives you the same feel. It makes the strings a little more slinky than a regular Fender, and then it's sort of kind of like Billy Gibbons-ish, where it's a Billy Gibbons custom shop Seymour Duncan pickup that's meant to sound like a kind of a Gibson PAF. This a little bit heavy, it's a heavy-duty bridge in the sense that it's just slightly thicker than a vintage bridge, and that all affects the sound. It sort of takes some of the twang away, but I sort of look at this as like a little rock and roll machine. And then that going into this small little Benson amp, it's called a Vinny. It's a 1 watt. I think the main power tube is the EL84. And the reason why I picked this amp up is that a bigger amp like a Marshall or a Fender Vibrolux or something like that, it just doesn't. It's really hard to get this type of character out of a bigger amp, and this kind of hints back to the days when guys were making albums at Sun Studios in Memphis, where it's sort of like in the Valco Supro tradition, where they're small amps, and then 8-inch speakers. And I love this guy Willie Johnson, who played with Howlin' Wolf. So it's sort of and I made the background tracks that that we'll be hearing with this amp, and actually a tuned down Telecaster that's a low C. And I'm not running any pedals. There's no boost or anything. It's just pretty much this kind of humbucker pickup, one pickup right into the amplifier, and that's how
it's killer. So again, it's 1 watt.
1 watt,
right?
Yeah.
How have you got it set? And give props to the brand name again.
Benson is, and I just sort of texted with him the other day. But Benson is a maker in Portland, Oregon, and I was on tour. And I was at Emerald City Guitars in Seattle, and I was just hanging out playing different stuff. And I was thinking about buying one of those old Valcos or Supros, but then it's like you're buying a 50 or 60-year-old amplifier, and it you can get them repaired. But I just like the idea of this was a new amp. It sort of had a reminiscent sound of that kind of era, but it's brand new. It's its own circuitry. So, and then the other thing I liked about this is that it has a line out post transformer, so you can actually use that guitar head as a distortion pedal before a big amp.
Nice.
And so it's interesting, and to use it as a studio tool also. Like if you wanted to run a vocal track and get distortion, you can get not only tube distortion, but post-transformer distortion, which is really cool.
Yeah, very cool. And so the settings on it, very simple.
Yeah.
Right?
It goes from 1 to 10, and it's about at 9.5, and I pretty much got my volume up all the way. I have a special cap that I put in to this, so even all the way rolled off, it's a little bit more like a cocked wah sound. It's not completely a regular tone control where you roll off, with the settings rolled all the way off, it would be, it would just sound like it was underwater. But what's interesting about it is like here it is wide open. And then by just rolling that tone off a little bit, it sort of adds a slightly, P90-ish sound. Gets a little more lo-fi and creamy, and it just seemed like this pickup with that tone control and this amp is just something kind of magical happens.
So is there the cabinet that comes with the head?
Yeah, it's basically like a little stack. Again, Benson, it's called the B.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but explain what sits in between so folks know what that other unit is.
We're using a universal audio. It's called the OX, and that's just makes it easier to get a feed, and like we're talking right now. So it's an attenuator also, so we can kind of knock down, even though it's 1 watt, it would be a little bit loud for us to be talking over,
right?
So we needed to even knock down the volume coming off the speaker a little bit, and so that's mainly like for recording purposes and attenuation. But basically, it's a 10-inch speaker in there. I think it's a Jensen, and it's Benson, Benson, and it's like a little mini stack.
And so, do you buy the head separately, or does it come together?
It comes together. I bought it as a set when I was in Seattle, and it's funny because coming down here, I fit the head in a backpack.
I know.
And then the speaker cabinet went into a suitcase.
I
And
know,
so
great.
It's like have a stack, we'll travel.
Absolutely. The tone is, it's phenomenal, and not just perfect for this particular course, as folks will hear shortly as we dig deeper, but just generally speaking, it's got a great kind of feel, right?
It's just really, it's interesting because again, with the way that these background tracks were made, just to let the folks know, I kind of did them in the Bo Diddley style, where we don't have a huge heavy bass drum or snare drum or cymbals going on. It's basically like a tom-tom, maracas, no bass, but a very low-tuned telly.
Yeah.
And it's
tuned down to C.
tuned down
you
to
said?
C. It's standard Spanish tuning.
Uh-huh.
But it just sort of lends itself to, like, I don't know, it makes me play stuff that's a little bit squawkier or something. It's not as smooth as a bigger amp. It's just got this kind of nasty sound to it, but it's like a beautiful nastiness. So that's what made me fall in love with it. I was at the store and I was playing other stuff, but I kept going back to this, and I just sat there for like an hour just playing the thing, and then I bought it.
We're definitely going to try to get our hands on one. Probably one for the studio, and then one maybe to give away.
Yeah, we'll talk to them
when we launch your course.
Sure.
Right? Let's put it to work.
Yeah,
Pick
let's
a
do it.
tune. Let's play something.
Okay, sounds good. This is a 2-beat in A.
great.
Yeah,
man.
thanks, man. A
That
little,
was
little
great.
flub in there, but you
No,
know, whatever.
I don't think anybody noticed. I sure didn't. Okay, so for those of you who are meeting Jim for the first time, I think you now understand why we're so excited to have him in the house here. We've already talked about all the other projects we're going to do, you know, beyond this one. The right hand has been fascinating us, you know, your right hand technique. Can you talk just a little bit about what the heck you're doing over there?
Yeah, sure. It's an interesting development because it didn't happen even within 5 years. It seemed to happen over like 20 years. Mainly because I studied classical guitar when I was like 12 or 13 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I was playing, you know, really into playing finger picking style. I got kind of moved away from the guitar a little bit and then got back into it again. And I was playing electric with a pick. But then I think, you know, maybe it wasn't even until my 20s, my aunt and uncle, they were getting rid of all these records and they had a bunch of Chet Atkins records.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, there was a album cover and he was sitting there with a thumb pick on and I was like, wait a minute, like you can, you know, growing up in the North, it was like you can play an electric with a thumb pick, you know, and just the idea of Chet Atkins' playing really appealed to me, and I was listening to all those records, and I thought, well, why don't I try it? So I bought a thumb pick, And then basically it just started out like, I don't think there's a flat pick here, but any lick that you would play with a flat pick, something like, all of a sudden I would just split, kind of keep each finger on the 3 strings, and it seemed to be more efficient, economical way to play stuff. And then I also found that just the tone of it seemed to be way more interesting than just having the pick attack everything.
Mm-hmm.
It created hills and valleys with the sound, and it's really funny. In the video I talked about a little bit about this, but it's really interesting that even if I play this note with like the A with my index finger, and then I play it with my ring finger, it's just maybe slightly different,
Mm-hmm.
but just because the fingers work a different way, it just creates more. And then when playing faster runs, it's kind of like you split up the responsibilities between everything. So it's not just one little thing doing all the speed. It's sort of like a little hammer on down here that gives the pinky a rest, or the index finger a rest while the thumb takes over. So that's why I say it developed over like more than a decade, because it really just came out of playing traditional blues licks.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's how and then I just forgot my thumb picks one time, and I found that I kind of sacrificed some speed, but then playing with my thumb, it just made me feel much closer to the instrument. And
you seem to have caught up though.
yeah,
to the speed
but
thing.
it would just be sometimes
There's like a little step backwards and then many steps forward, right?
And it's slightly like sometimes when I'm playing the faster runs, I'll get a little hiccup here and there, but I'd much rather have that and then be able to just sort of on the fly. That doesn't sound, that would be like a pick would sound.
Right.
But to me, that's just such a cool,
Absolutely. So, well, we didn't show you this, but in the studio we took your index finger. It's like blazingly fast. It's amazing. We'll show you later, like a zoom up of the right hand, slow mode, and it's. Do you know anybody else that picks quite the way you do?
Well, there's players that Brent Mason is a phenomenal finger picker, and he's a guy in Nashville that plays with a thumb pick. But then I noticed like a lot of times they might not be playing fast runs like chicken picking runs, but like Jimmy Vaughn plays a lot with his fingers. Jeff Beck primarily plays with his fingers now.
But your particular combination of moves seems very unique.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting sort of
like almost like a Frankenstein technique,
Yeah.
There's that classical thing happening.
Yeah.
Then there's probably the influence from using the thumb pick and then moving to the thumb, and then it's killer.
Yeah.
Teach us, if you would, one move from maybe the solo you just played.
So
give us just a lick using fingers that we can practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And this lick is based around, it's a very 50s sounding lick where the root of it came from this shape, which is it's almost like a triad, but with the sixth. And I stretched that over here. Something maybe Scotty Moore would play or Chuck Berry or something like that. And then that's basically
now. Can you move the headstock forward towards me just so we can get under that right hand?
Totally.
And could you play that like at 30 miles an hour?
Sure.
Okay.
And it's really just whatever variation you want to do. You could play it. If I'm playing it faster. And that's all in A. And then I do a little bit of like, that's sort of just putting it up a half step. It just sounds cool, I think. And really, again, it just comes from.
Killer. I mean, that move seems to be also would be not only cool lick, but a cool exercise to work on that technique.
Sure,
you know?
there's with all of this stuff, it really is. There's no substitute for just time on the instrument, you know, and I do find, anything. If I'm just working on a line like that, it helps my slow playing, and but I do think that it's the guitar playing world. It's especially when there's distortion involved. I just find the finger style or finger, I'm not really using my nails. With other than my thumb, sometimes I'll use the nail, but I just think it's an interesting sound with basically distortion, the plucking, and just how the note blooms, rather than being picked with a pick.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah.
So the course, you've organized the course pretty much into 2 sections.
Yep.
First section, you share some techniques, some concepts, dialing in tone, which was an awesome segment. And then in the second section, you apply all of those techniques and kind of approaches over a series of performance studies.
That's right, yeah.
And so you're playing, the playing examples today are the tracks you're playing over in the course.
That's right, and the tracks that the people, will get.
Okay.
The background tracks.
Let's do another one.
Okay.
Pick one.
All right. We'll do just more of a shuffle blues in G.
Cool. that track is on the course.
Yes.
Right? Before I ask you to show us the Buchanan thing from there, just want you to know you've got friends and fans shouting out from, let's see, Ghana,
Oh, wow.
Portugal,
Holy.
Brazil, Italy, France, Chicago.
Wow.
Good old Chicago,
Yeah.
right? Iceland, Gormani.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I'm sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly. Barcelona. I mean, all over the world.
That's
the
amazing.
tribe, right?
Yeah.
We'll talk about the tribe in a minute.
Yeah.
Show us the Buchanan.
Okay,
move.
Roy Buchanan is one of my favorite players of all time, and somebody that knew Roy Buchanan showed me this lick, and it could be, we're in G, and I'm going out of tune a little bit here, but it could be used on all the changes, and basically, it's just... So that's very much a Roy Buchanan sound. There we go. And so it starts on the 3rd fret on the D and G string. And then you go to your regular root and 3rd. And what's kind of cool about that, it's a very Buchanan-ish sound, is I'm playing the 3rd with my pinky on top, and then I'm bending up to the root with my ring finger. Five chord. So that's sort of like, you can hear that. I think he plays it on his first album for Polydor.
Great player. Huh?
Yeah, beautiful player.
Influenced a lot of people.
Yeah.
Would you mind telling the Paul Simon story and the drum thing?
Yeah, it's a really crazy story. Well, just to let people know, I've worked with Paul Simon for close to a decade. And originally, I studied South Indian percussion frame drum. And with this teacher who played in Paul Simon's band. And I was living in Connecticut at the time, and Paul Simon moved to Connecticut. And so he needed a teacher for his son, and his son wanted to learn guitar, and he wanted to learn some drums too. And so my friend recommended me. And I taught at Paul's house for, 5 or 6 years, and his son eventually, settled on guitar, so I was his guitar teacher for about 5 years. And one day, Paul heard a guitar project I was working on, and then he was making an album with Phil Ramone, so he invited me to bring my instruments into the studio, and I ended up playing bass, guitar, and drums on Paul Simon's So Beautiful or So What. And so you mean the story about, and then playing the drums on tour. So
how did a guitar player wind up playing drums?
Yeah.
Paul Simon can have any drummer in the world.
It's really
right?
interesting. I mean, we originally the plan was he had already had a drummer in his group, and I was supposed to go out as sort of like kind of to hold down the American side of things on guitar.
Right.
Maybe play some auxiliary percussion, and that was the plan. And then I was at his house one day, and he has a separate thing where he works on music, and we were listening to the album, and then we drove up to the house, and then we're in the driveway, and he's like, "Oh, by the way," he's like, "the drummer left." He goes, "Can you cover that chair?" And I said, "Yeah, I could, sure, I could do that." And so that's how I ended up playing drums, and I still got a guitar feature on the road. He gave me a Chet Atkins feature, so it's a pretty. I will say this, that it'd be pretty, the muscles are different, so it's kind of hard. It's a lot harder to switch between the instruments, like on a gig. Mm-hmm. You're playing both kit and then switch to guitar. It's a little bit tough.
I'll bet it is.
Yeah, so, but that's essentially the story of how that came about.
People come up to you, hey, you're the drummer from...
Yeah, right, yeah, exactly.
And guitar, what do they say about your...
Well, it was like first, like I know you call them trolls or the forums. Like at first, it was like, he's a drummer, and then but guitar is a hobby.
Yeah.
And then when I started making more guitar records, then it was like, he's a really good guitar player, but his drumming is generic. So it's like you just can't win. It's just like there's no way to win.
No,
yeah, there's no way.
Yeah, no matter what.
No matter what.
But as we talked, some very, very awesome world-class guitar players like yourself also play drums, most notably Tommy Emmanuel.
Yeah.
Loves playing drums.
Yeah.
Any chance he gets, he's on the kit,
Well, and
so there has to be some, some rhythmic synergy of some kind between the two.
Yeah, and there's also like Albert King played drums for years.
Right.
Lester Young, a famous jazz saxophone player.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a little bit more of a history there as far as like learning from another instrument, and really it's at the end of the day it's all rhythm. It's the guitar, bass, piano, drums, they're all rhythm instruments.
Right.
It's just funny with education. Maybe I don't know. Maybe because Western civilization, it seemed to me like the courses taught for piano players or guitar players, rhythm is sort of the last on the list.
Yeah.
In some ways.
Yeah. It's interesting what we found over all these years, producing educational content is, guitar players spend 95% of their time playing rhythm.
Yeah.
But they spend 95% of their time working on their lead.
Yeah.
It's just something that seems to be overlooked.
Yeah.
And, pretty much all of the teachers here make a really valid point, which is get your rhythm together, your lead will follow.
Yeah, and then sometimes, the times that I've been asked to play, a blistering solo on somebody's record as opposed to, like I played on a track on Paul Simon's latest record on guitar, and it was live in the studio, but basically it was, I got called to play. There was no real solo, just... And so it's sort of like, where is all that,
Right.
all that blistering solo stuff
Right.
doesn't apply there. See,
Right.
I think doing both is great,
Absolutely.
I'm not so much a fan of like, the slower you play, the more feeling, because sometimes you get angry in life and you talk fast.
Right.
So I think it should be a well-rounded vocabulary.
Absolutely. So, first off, for anyone that's live now, we have the chat line. You can ask Jim any question you like, make any comments you like. Shout out and tell us where you're from. And of course, immediately following this live broadcast, this entire thing will be available on demand, forever and ever. So.
Mistakes and all.
Mistakes and all, man. That's live TV for you. So I wanted to make a comment because, the quality, the fidelity for some people, because we're going through YouTube and the compression and internet connections. So Christian very politely says, hey, guys, great show, but the sound of the backing track is terribly awful, too much volume and very saturated. And so I think I want to point out two things. One is 95% of that is deliberate. That's the sound we're going for here. And if it sounds too saturated to you, it may very well be your internet connection. So, that's the whole point of the amp we're working with, the whole RetroACTIVE thing. So thank you for pointing that out. And I think when you hear the produced versions of these, you'll find that it's still, a heavy volume. The guitar parts will shine through. But I think it's the internet connection that's mostly garbling it for you. But most everything you're hearing is intentional. Let's play something else.
Okay.
Speaking of heavy volume, saturation.
Sure. Let's pull up the next track. This is a real simple kind of backbeat thing.
Okay.
It's just a 2-chord track. Yeah, we'll go for it.
Cool. Sweet. That was awesome, man.
Cool.
That one's also off the course,
Yes,
right?
all of them are, yeah.
Hey, guys out there, we dropped the track volume a little bit. Did that sound a little bit better? Let us know. We'll tweak it a little bit more for you. We want everyone to be happy. I thought the balance was great on that one.
Yeah.
But why don't you guys chime in? Let us know what you're hearing out there. Okay, a couple more questions, couple quick questions. Sid Arth has several questions.
Okay.
So we probably, Sid Arth, don't have enough time to answer them all, right? But he wants to get better on blues playing. And can you show him a sus2 lick?
Sus2 lick. I'm not sure what he means by a sus2 lick.
Okay, let's answer another one of his questions.
Okay.
Give him some advice for how to improve his blues playing.
The main
Name 3 things.
Give him 3 things. The main thing I would tell him to do is get some old big band music from like Chick Webb. And I don't care if it's a pair of chopsticks or spoons or whatever, you know, or even just on his hand, you know, on his knee or something like that. I still will get a pair of brushes and just play along. Just even, I'm not saying you have to play a complicated pattern, just if like, you know, if the track is going, just to sit there with your hands and move along to the track. And it may seem kind of crazy, but all blues music comes from American rhythm. And it's something that didn't happen anywhere else in the world, and it comes down to swing. It's a swing. It basically is swung. 8th note didn't happen in any other form of music.
Show us an example of straight versus swung.
Okay, so like,
So like take a blues lick, a simple lick for Sid Arth and everyone else.
yeah.
Play it straight and then play it swung.
Okay, so so basically, you know, we're looking at a very strict straight. I'll just use the same voicing. You know, and that's sort of like, it would sound fine with a backbeat, but it's just more, you know, and even how some people notate swing, but basically when I say swing, it's just. And whether it be like the Louis Jordan band that B.B. King loved, or Count Basie, Chick Webb, all, you know, really a huge part of, up until even like, if you listen to the early 50s rock and roll, that's what's so cool about it, is it's, even when they're playing a straight thing, because they just came off of 20 years of like swing music, everything's like Eddie Cochran and early Elvis is really swinging a lot. It's not just straight up and down motion. So mainly I would just say to him, just almost like prescription for medication, just make sure you're listening to really early American music, you know, Louis Jordan, Chick Webb, early B.B. King, and that, you know, and then other than that, I would just say that, like, it's really important to listen to the early acoustic blues guys like Son House, Charlie Patton, Booker White. I'm not saying anybody has to become an expert on that music or learn how to play in open tunings or slide or anything like that. It's just your brain is, in a way, it's a computer, and if like we were working in Photoshop, the only thing we would have to work with is what photos we put into Photoshop. And playing music is the same thing, where it's like the more information you can feed yourself with of the early roots of blues music, American music, roots music, when you go to play a solo, it's just going to inform what you're playing. And it becomes less about information and more about kind of the feeling that you have for the music.
Great answer.
Okay.
Siddhartha, I hope that helps you along there. Let's do another tune.
Okay, that sounds good. What do we have? This one is sort of like what I would, you know, I'm playing over, this is more of a country western tune. Country western changes.
Okay, cool.
But I'll be playing, you know, blues and country licks on it. So go ahead. Let's cue this up.
killer, man.
Cool.
Folks are really digging it, too.
Are they really all good?
Yeah, I think we've nailed the sound, too.
Oh, good,
Yeah.
good.
Man, we're starting to run out of time, but we were talking over lunch about your view on, the tribe.
Yeah.
Would you share that kind of philosophy?
Well,
with
yeah.
everyone?
I mean, I think with anything where there's an art form, and especially to get to the trolls or people that make comments, or music can be like a sport, and there is a sense of winning and losing, every night. Sometimes you really hit it, sometimes, but like we were talking about earlier, before civilization and people were doing cave paintings, why were they doing that? Was it a sport back then? Was it to be like, if I do this cave painting, I'll get the promotion at work? Or I don't, you know what I mean? It's just like it. So I guess why I brought it up is that the one thing we can all share, no matter what age we're at or life, in what country, is that there's some human need to want to make music. And by making music, and like by you guys starting this video thing, you created a community, which is sort of like a tribe. And so the one thing I'd like to mention is that it's not I don't think it should be like, this guy's up here and I'm down here, and this, it's just all about being a member, because we simply love music and we have a need to create, And in the times where it's like, I'm performing and I'll hit a bad note and then I'm like, and my mind goes there, I lose sight of it myself, where it's like, I just have a need to do this. And really the point of making the video is to sort of give people permission to explore things in their own way, and just let people know that they are important. They're an important part of the tribe. Like all of us are very, and as we're here for a short time. And then even if you do get the promotion at work or the cushy job or whatever, we have to leave it. So it's important to, I think, mention that. And to me, thinking about early humans, or the need to make art, the need to make music, that's just hitting like a reset button for a value system. It just makes me have, kind of keeps me in check. Like, let's just try and keep the intentions pure.
That's a beautiful philosophy, and I think it's a philosophy. I hope it's a philosophy shared. Certainly we share it.
Yeah.
But, I mean, look at what we have here. People from all over the world.
Yeah.
Music and the guitar in particular, kind of a universal language, And I just love your whole attitude that, it's not about a marquee name or playing Madison Square Garden. It's the guy that comes home, after the promotion, picks up his guitar, and interacts with the tribe and plays music.
Yeah,
and I love that vibe. Tell us what you've got going on. You've got a couple of new recordings.
Yeah, basically, the Paul Simon world has sort of he stopped touring, so he's I'm sure he'll still be making music, but basically that sort of thing ended in September. And I'll be moving out to Los Angeles at the beginning of the year. But I have 2 albums. I spent 3 months living in Sweden and Poland, writing music. And then I have a sort of a rock album where I played all the instruments, kind of arranged everything. And then that just went off to mastering. And then I spent some time getting these old National guitars from the 30s restored. Resonators. Yeah. And then it's funny because one project is sort of like lots of overdubbing where I'm playing everything, and then the Resonator project is just completely live, me in a room, just microphones on the guitar and the voice, and everything's just sort of your old time, Book of White, sort of like just sitting in front of the microphone, playing a Resonator and singing. So
that's great.
Yeah, those are the 2 projects that'll be coming up pretty soon.
Yeah, well, we're excited about those. For those of you that are interested and kind of dug what you heard and saw today, There's some great YouTube videos. I particularly love the ones with Wes and Brian.
Yeah, the one from House of David.
So
yeah.
Robin Ford actually is the one who said, listen, and of course you've been on our radar screen for a long time, but
Yeah.
when Robin was in last time, he said, listen, whatever you have to do, get this guy in now.
Yeah.
And so thank you, Robin,
Yeah,
for that.
thank you very much.
And, speaking of Robin, it's his trio or, guys that have recorded and toured with him. Give props to Brian and Wes.
Oh, yeah,
you?
Wes Little and Brian Allen have been in Robin's band for years, and it's sort of that unit has been a trio. And just by the nature of the fact that they live in Nashville and I live in Nashville at the moment, we just started playing with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And even I think there'll be a couple of songs being released eventually where Robin and I are playing together with
Mm-hmm.
Wes and Brian.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just sort of like it's just sort of a nice thing where it's like the place, the community led to that collaboration.
Yeah, Nashville, what a...
Yeah, it's a hotbed.
Yeah, it really is. And so was it the videos at David's house?
House of David.
House of David.
Yeah, house. Yeah,
and it's a trio thing.
Yeah.
And you're singing.
Yep.
And there's several videos from that.
Yeah, there's
right?
like 3 songs.
Yeah,
on that.
they're phenomenal. You may not recognize Jim because Jim has a variety of looks.
I fell into a bucket of bleach. Yeah.
Recently. But you need to tune that in. You need to look out for, well, I would pick up the record you already have out there.
Yep.
Where can they get that on your website?
Mostly, I do have some stuff up on Bandcamp and mainly, but like it's sort of like the record that everyone seems to love is this record I made with Larry Goldings and Jim Keltner.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Sunset, and you could buy physical copies of that from Compass Records or on eBay, and then the stuff that I have, this is the year to sort of like update everything, and everything is just moving towards streaming, so I'll be moving the albums over to Spotify.
Cool, but they can find out everything about these albums, these projects, your tours on your website.
Yeah.
Which is?
It's www.jimoblon.net.
Okay, .net.
.net, yeah. Okay. The .com.
Someone stole your .com,
It
right?
ran out, and now it's like a dog trainer or dentist or something. Yeah,
God.
yeah.
That's crazy.
Yes.
And I see that Zach has put up, we don't usually do this, but he put up a link here on this broadcast, at least in the YouTube description version of it.
Yeah.
Maybe on the TrueFire one as well. They can pre-order this course that we talked about today.
Great.
And save 25%.
Oh, wow.
Which is big. So do that. I think this is a must-have. If you dig anything that you've heard, just anybody should pick this one up. You want to let's run Altered C again.
Okay.
You played that in.
Yeah.
And play us out. But before you do that, anything else you'd like to share with fans and friends all over the world, man?
Oh, gee, it's crazy. I mean, I would just say again that it's like, let's just, as corny as it may sound, let's just kind of celebrate the fact that we're alive and we have the ability to make music, and let's just kind of grow together.
Beautiful. And thank you to everybody out there for tuning in the middle of your day. Wish you all a happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, happy
if
Thanksgiving.
you celebrate it in your
If you
respective
celebrate it, yeah.
countries. If not, we'll be sure to toast all of you during our Thanksgiving and give thanks for you supporting the cause here.
Great.
And play us out, man.
Okay, we'll do that Altered C blues again, Tommy.